Norwegian black metal hails. Mysticum is probably one of the most underrated Norwegian black metal names, and in a way I understand why. First of all, there are only a couple of full albums, and secondly, it's a little bit bizarre of a black metal name. Now the band started as early as 1992, so it makes it one of the first Norwegian bands, or one of the earlier ones. There were lots of bands going on in the early 90s, even late 80s, but still Mysticum somehow managed to dive into the kind of a first wave, if we can call it that, of black metal names, and paved their name with their very unique music. Now it was until 1996 already before their first album came out, so in that respect they were not doing albums in the first wave, but nevertheless making a big impact in the scene. Now, I got the pleasure of interviewing the band at Steelfest 2019. I hope it to have you reaching soon. But first, for May 2019 classic album review, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this album called In the Streams of Inferno. So what we have here is my personal copy of this album from my own collection. I'm not exactly sure when I got this on CD, but it was probably 1998, 1999, around that era anyway. And the album had been out there for a while. Like I said, it was released in 1996. So what do we have here is basically very 90s kind of release. As you can see, this is released by Full Moon Production, who used to be very cult label back then, releasing CDs. Nowadays you don't get to see these kind of compact disc marks in this way anyway. So this is more with the phone numbers rather than internet pages. And then we have obviously this old lineup photos. Guys are bigger, older, and more mature. Live ones, I mean, these guys are no small drug users. If they were that in the early days, looking like that, very typical black metal heads. Here we have classic acknowledgements or thank you list. As you can see, all these names here are from the 90s. Very typical thank you list, which are, in my opinion, still very cool. And then we have these drug remarks, like this angel dust comment here. And as you probably noted, there was something else also mentioned about drugs. Once again, never stop the madness, very 90s kind of thing, a symbol of all that stuff. And once again, I need to just mention this drug connection here, like don't control drugs, let them control you. That was the message by Mysticum back in the days. Now, things in that respect might have changed a bit, but maybe not too much. I got to talk with these guys at the interview, when we're doing the interview, about drugs, and let me tell you, all these topics about Satan, drugs, they are all there, so you will get some new opinions maybe about these topics when we get there. So what is the music? Why is it so important and interesting when it comes to Mysticum? Now we must understand that all the bands basically back in early 90s, mid 90s, they were more or less kind of a second wave of creating black metal, very riff oriented. Some had synths, some were more melodic, more in your face in the terms of like first wave, but Mysticum was something different. They were not doing this melodic synth, even folk medieval type of stuff like Satyricon, nor atmospheric stuff like Burzum, not raw black metal like Dark Throne, nor this hyper-blasting chaotic stuff like Immortal. Mysticum was creating this very industrial, very machine-like, cold and grim black metal with a drum machine. So right from the beginning with this album, it is clear that these guys are now ordinary Norwegians, not creating not ordinary Norwegian black metal. Whereas so many bands were creating these nice melodies and getting kind of warm, nature-like feeling, Mysticum is totally different breed. It's like Satan itself became sort of a machine ready to kill all living organisms right there, and then using drugs. So there are these themes of mushroom clouds and mushrooms in other ways, and also these kind of big machines without any intentions of moral law, just creating its stuff. This is then combined with riffs which are very grim and cold sounding in production wise, and then we have these quite typical but not too typical black metal vocals which are just laid there with the music. Now, this is something that nowadays we could see there are copycats, not too many maybe, but so-called industrial black metal has since stepped forward with various albums and bands. But the Mysticum were there, like basically doing the pioneer work. And still, when I was prior to this video anyway, I was listening to the album. I got this kind of a distant, not like nostalgia, but distant feeling like, oh man, why isn't anybody else basically doing the same kind of stuff? And when Mysticum does their stage show with their lights and this kind of industrial feeling, it is like a different thing, like a genre on its own. I really like, I got to see this for the second time. I really like what they were doing. You know, there's something magical and at the same time very distant because it's not organic, it's not typical rock and roll music. It's like some bizarre minds are creating some absurd kind of music, like what is going on, these are machines not people. And then there are these elements of drugs, you know, which are then again a little bit a different angle versus so many other bands. So the Streams of Inferno is still, in my opinion, a very timeless album. It's not one of those 1990s albums that it seems like a product of that era. Like what I could say basically about the first Satyricon album. Back then it was godlike. Nowadays it feels like a little bit like out of its time, but not in a good way, I guess. But in the Streams of Inferno, it's just this industrial magic, very, very cold, inhuman feeling. What can I say? A definite classic, even now, 33 years later after its release. If you haven't missed Mysticum, now it's your chance to reclaim your soul, or at least find a good album. Thank you for watching, and as always, should you have any questions, opinions, whatever, drop them on the comment box below. See ya!